Yes, it's my autumn almanac.
Well, the leaves are turning and the nights are drawing in. There's nobody down on the beach and barbecues are being tidied away into garden sheds for another year. But I don't mind the gathering gloom, because when I consult the calendar, the weeks and months that lie ahead are all coloured red and black. Because my name's Michael, and this is All Departments.
Here come the cherries and we're heading for the top of the tree. Bournemouth is a team that's going to show Division 3. Here come the leaders and the scorers at the Saturday, showing how to win the Southern way. So we sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. While you're out there winning, hear the shouting and the singing. We sing, come on Bournemouth, come on Bournemouth. Here come the cherries, here come the cherries, here come the cherries, number one.
Hello and welcome to episode 9 of All Departments. With the Cherries sitting comfortably in the championship table during the international break, King Eddie Howe took the opportunity to reflect on the magnificent year he has had since returning to the club. During the past 12 months, he has selected no less than 5 different goalkeepers, including 3 in the space of 5 days recently, as Darryl Flahaven stepped in to perform heroics at Leeds following Ryan Alsop's sending off, only to pick up an injury which led to the arrival of Stephen Henderson on loan from West Ham. The Irish international arrived in the wake of teammate Jack Collison's sudden appearance in the Cherries midfield at Ellen Road, as injuries and suspensions left Eddie with surprisingly few options in that department. Jeff Mostyn returned as chairman, whilst record signing Tequilo Ranti made his debut against Barnsley but has only scored in international football in the games since. More internationals will soon be on show at the Court as it plays host to the England under-16s against Northern Ireland in November. Not many Bournemouth players have turned out for England, but one man who served his country with distinction in the Second World War was defender Laurie Cunningham, who sadly passed away last week aged 91 with no less than 285 appearances in the old red and black to his name. Well, the relationship between football and the radio goes back a long way, and for several decades BBC Radio Solent has brought news of the Cherries' fortunes to our eager ears whenever we can't make it to the match. Kris Temple has been commentating on those games for over 10 years, and I'm delighted to say he joins us now. Kris, welcome to All Departments.
No worries, good to speak to you.
So, tell us first of all how you got the gig as commentator at Radio Solent and how you became the voice that we often hang on to on a Saturday afternoon when we don't travel away from home in particular.
Well, there's a bit of a good luck story with it, to be honest. It was the door sort of came ajar at the right time for me. I was doing another job in sports development after I finished my degree, and I just wrote to the then BBC Radio Solent sports editor John Smith and expressed an interest in being a football reporter. And I'd done a bit of university sort of stuff, bit of university media and things, and expressed an interest in just coming in to see what Solent did. And I went to a game with him at Dorchester. He was going out reporting at Dorchester, and he gave me the opportunity straight away, which was very kind of him looking back, to do some off-air commentary, which I had never really done before. So I was just sort of commentating on passages of play on 2 teams really I didn't know anything about. And obviously managed to show some sort of ability because he asked me back the next week to actually go and report on a game in my own right. So that was down at Weymouth against Hitchin. I can't even remember the score, but that was my first sort of in the door at Solent. And then literally only a couple of weeks later, I got a call from him on a Friday afternoon to say, can you go to Bury tomorrow to do a commentary? And I was a bit obviously apprehensive about that, having never done a commentary before, let alone on the radio, because one of their regular freelancers had let them down. But I said, if you're happy to give me a go, then I'll certainly give it a go. Drove up on my own. Remember basically panicking over Friday night. Could I possibly do enough research in the very few hours I had before the game? But I got given a Radio Solent pool car with aerial sticking out at the top, and even that was pretty exciting, to be honest. Drove all the way up to Manchester. Arrived at Bury. And the Cherries lost the game 2-1. But it was that's where it all started.
And I remember reading somewhere Was it that game where you had a bit of a nightmare with the commentary?
I've probably had the most. I mean, I've had a few technical nightmares in the past, but up until probably the last 18 months, 2 years, that was probably my biggest ever technical nightmare, my first ever game. I remember John Smith said to me, the summariser in those days was basically the spare player. So whoever the Cherries weren't naming on the bench, the spare squad player that travelled, they came and sat with us and did the commentary. And more often than not, it was a similar sort of figure, the likes of Amos Foyewa or Chucky Erebid in those days. So I remember they said, go to the ground. When you get there, search out Sean O'Driscoll, the manager, and he'll tell you who's not in the squad, and that's your summariser. So I searched out Sean. I didn't really know too much about him, obviously, because I hadn't followed Bournemouth that closely before being propelled into commentating on them. And Sean said, oh no, someone had gone down ill, and there wasn't anybody spare that day. So I obviously panicked stations again, and I ended up doing the commentary on my own, which is the only time in my 11 and a bit year career now that I've ever done a commentary on my own. And we had loads of technical problems. The line kept dropping out. I was doing bits on the phone. Obviously, I didn't know the technical side of it either really well, so someone back in the studio was having to talk me through it. I think we just about managed to get through the game, but as many technical problems in that game as I've probably had in 10 years since.
A bit of a baptism of fire. So certainly you mentioned preparation there. Just tell us about how you prepare for the game in terms of how you get to know the players, particularly from obviously the visiting team, whoever we're playing, and also what you do on the day of the game leading up to the match.
Well, obviously these days it's a lot easier to find out information. I mean, I remember going back, it was the club website, the visiting club website was pretty much the only source of information for things like that. But now, I mean, for example, Soccer Base is an absolute staple for commentators. It does have a few flaws. I know some of the sort of historical stats aren't necessarily bang on. And Neil Perrott from the Bournemouth Echo has got much more reliable stats than Soccer Base. He's bang up to date. But that is a good starting point for things like sequences, head-to-heads, things like that. I probably spend about, I would say in total, probably 2 to 3 hours ahead of each game, looking up information about the game. Obviously, the fact that now I do Bournemouth every single week again means that the Cherries players are pretty much in your head. I have a sheet of stats on them with ages and appearances and goals and things, so I'm aware of any milestones that are coming up. But in terms of the opposition, we'll often speak to our BBC colleagues who cover them week in, week out, obviously at other local radio stations, to get an idea of formations, to get an idea of injuries and various other things. So that's normally a good starting point as well. Even reading match reports from club websites, reading match reports on the BBC site, just getting an idea of how the last couple of games have gone, any significant incidents in those games, and bits and bobs like that, really. The thing is, you can, as a commentator, lots of people like to be totally prepared and have absolutely nothing left to chance. I'm one of those who will look up, I would probably have 10 or 12 key stats about each team in terms of the number of games they've won in a row or things like that, because you can really get bogged down in stats. There are certain commentators, and John Motson obviously would be the one that springs to mind, who is, obviously he's based himself on being a stato. But sometimes people don't want to be bombarded with stats because they're just numbers. People, first and foremost, want to know what's happening in the game. So we always say stats are there basically to decorate the commentary. They're not there to be the backbone of it. They can fill in a few gaps if there's an injury, or they can give you a nice bit of information about somebody. But I always sort of have my stats there as a bit of a safety net, really. And some games I'll go through them and I'll look down after the game and think, well, I didn't even read, 3/4 of them. And other games, and there's been a couple, I have to say, this season already, where I've looked down my stats after about half an hour and thought I haven't got many left in the tank for the second half here. So it really does vary on the quality of the game, how many stats you end up getting out, to be honest.
And on the day of the game, what time do you normally arrive at the court?
Dean Court, I will get there about 12 o'clock, actually, mainly because there's an excellent press lunch on these days, but we'll skip over that. About 12 o'clock. We're on air at 2 o'clock, obviously, for a Saturday afternoon programme. I used to get there at 12 when I presented the programme from Dean Court on occasions, but so I've sort of kept that going. Only because you always like to know the equipment's all working. I'm one who'd like to go into the ground, set everything up, make sure the line connects properly, make sure I've got everything, and then relax for an hour, go and speak to other journalists who are arriving for the game, go and have lunch with our other media colleagues, obviously find out any tidbits of team news you can from the tunnel, and just basically make yourself relax, because there's nothing worse in any walk of life than rushing around everywhere wiping sweat from your brow as you're going on air. So yeah, 12 o'clock. And once we go on air at 2 o'clock, I do a little bit at the top of the programme. And then again, with the advent of Twitter these days, getting hold of the team news is a lot easier. We used to have to wait for the press department to sort of walk up with their photocopied team sheets to the press box, which sometimes could be up to 2:30, even though the teams come out at 2. So the advent of Twitter makes that a lot quicker. And then between 2 and 3, we do various hits on the air. Obviously, as you'll hear if you listen to the programme, Willow chips in with bits and bobs. And then from about 5 to 3, it's all over to us, really. And we split our frequencies 3 ways, and it becomes sort of your own little programme up until full time.
And what about travelling away? It must be a bit more hit and miss, especially when you go to grounds that you're not that familiar with.
Yeah, so I mean, this season actually, it's funny you say that. This season, obviously Leicester coming up in a couple of weeks is a very rare new ground for me. I think I've only got 2 new grounds this season, which I'll be adding to the list. One of which was Doncaster. I hadn't been there a few weeks ago, and Leicester is one of the other ones on my list. So you get to the stage where once you've been to a ground once, you tend to know the rough setup, and that helps because you know if there's parking. I mean, even parking is a bit of a major thorn in your side sometimes, trying to actually get parked anywhere close. I know it's the same for fans as well. So an away ground, depending on where you are, again, sometimes they don't open the ground until 12:30, sometimes even 1 o'clock. So it varies from ground to ground, but same sort of procedure. I'll get there at 12 o'clock, and again, we will liaise with our local BBC colleagues because every club in the division is covered by a BBC local station. So there's always your sort of opposite numbers are always there. They'll point you where to sit and things. And it's fair to say some press boxes are a good experience and some certainly aren't.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. Is there much camaraderie in the press box if you miss like a yellow card or something? Are people happy to let you know what's happened if you've missed it?
Yeah, definitely. There definitely is. I mean, even at Dean Court, there'll be times where, even if it's more often than not, it's the cross that leads to a goal, or if there's a real melee of players, then, whoever got the last touch, sometimes you might miss it in the moment. So I would say people in the press box are always pretty good. I mean, I can think of times when I've looked to my right and, other local reporters have helped me out by shouting out a name, or usually if a commentator can't get a goal, can't get the scorer, for example, they'll sort of go through the goal celebration moment for about 10 or 15 seconds, and then the summariser will come in. And what you don't see on the radio, obviously, while Willow's talking, I'm scratching around speaking to somebody else saying who scored, basically, if there happens to be a time when I've missed it. So yeah, the camaraderie is pretty good. I think ultimately everybody at the end of the day wants to produce accurate, information, accurate reports. So I think everybody realises everyone's got a job to do. And
some press boxes aren't always as pleasant an experience.
I think when I say that in terms of the logistics rather than the personnel,
right? Okay.
The lack of room, let's say somewhere. I mean, some of the worst ones are actually in the Premier League. I mean, QPR. Well, they're obviously not in the Premier League anymore, but I went there a couple of seasons ago with Southampton. That is horrendous. There's no room at all. Everton is a nightmare. Tottenham, no room. It's right down by the dugouts. You sometimes see it on Match of the Day at Tottenham. I'd say in this division at the moment, I can't think of any real nightmares so far this season, but the Championship is pretty good. I mean, there's some Chesterfield's old ground used to be a nightmare. Me and Willow used to have to sit on different rows because we couldn't fit in the box together. And of course, the one thing that a lot of people don't realise about broadcast sort of commentary positions is we are set out with the fans. I mean, people, when you say commentary box, automatically think of a nice warm double glazed box with lights on and waitress service and whatever. It's far from that. It's just a seat with a desk basically in the stand in 99% of places. Some views are, as I say, low pitch level. Some views like Middlesbrough, spectacular view right at the back. Absolutely fantastic. Although you're a long way from the pitch, you can see absolutely everything. So yeah, the experience from ground to ground is pretty different.
You mentioned earlier that when you first started, you had to find the spare squad member who wasn't actually even on the bench that day to be the co-commentator. But then you've got a regular guy now, a big hero to all of us Cherries fans, John Williams. What's it like working with him?
Yeah, Willow's great. I mean, it's funny. I've sort of come full circle, really, because obviously having joined Solent, doing the Cherries, back in the days of Divisions 2 and 3 as they were, to have come back full circle and work with Willow again full time now. There are a few things about working with him that I'd forgotten, although I had obviously worked sporadically with him in the sort of the inter period between me doing the Cherries. But he's a great guy, and the fact that he's so popular with fans is obviously a big plus for us. People respect what he has to say. I mean, Eddie Howe, don't underestimate how much Eddie Howe respects what he has to say as well, because obviously Eddie doesn't listen to the radio, but he does talk to him at matches. Often you'll see, before the game when Eddie turns up to walk around the pitch, he'll have a chat with Willow as well. And Willow always wants, fundamentally, he really cares deeply about the club. That's the main thing, and you'll hear him sometimes doing his shouting over the commentary if something goes right or wrong, because he gets so involved in it. And I can't imagine sort of Willow's life without the Cherries. It's been such a big part of him, and that's why it's great for us to have such a sort of well-renowned figure. But obviously he has his failings. His snoring in the car is an absolute nightmare. He sometimes starts to fall over towards me in the driver's seat, such as his ability to fall asleep at the drop of a hat. But he does have a few good quizzes up his sleeve and things. He's got stuck on the M1 or something. He'll rattle off a couple of quiz questions. He's good company, and he's become obviously a really good friend over the years. And you can't even imagine the Cherries coverage without him in a minute.
No, we all love hearing from him. And does he put those shorts away yet, or does he wear those all through the winter?
No, well, the last game, what was it? Leeds away the last Tuesday night game. The trousers came out. I have to say there was a bit of a dip in the northern temperatures, so he's one of those people who will wear shorts until he absolutely can't wear them anymore. And even when he's wrapped up in the winter, he's wrapped up with some sort of sleeveless body warmer going on, rather than your big anorak that maybe you or I would wear. But yeah, so I don't know if the shorts will come back now. The temperatures have just dropped a bit again, so I think that might be the shorts in the draw for maybe the next couple of months.
Looking at the relationships that you have with the people at the club, what's it like trying to build relationships with managers, especially when they come and go?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, and I remember listening to the podcast that Neil Meldrum did with you, I probably agree with him in that Paul Groves was probably, and Jimmy Quinn were probably the two most difficult relationships to build, because we didn't really have any previous with them. Nobody really knew them. They came in sort of blind as it was. They were hard ones to sort of get to know, as it were. I mean, we're very lucky at the moment with Eddie, because obviously having played for the club and obviously been a manager previously, I've done commentaries with Eddie Howe in the past. In fact, I can remember a night at Blackpool when I did a commentary with Eddie Howe and Jason Tindler. I had two summarisers, one in each half, and they happened to be the two because I think they were both injured that night, which of course they spent unfortunate parts of their career injured. But obviously, as Eddie revealed at our forum this season, he doesn't always tell me the truth. He didn't tell everybody the truth. So you get to know the managers to a certain extent, but they'll still, even if they know you well, they'll still obviously not want to reveal all their cards to you. Again, obviously those who've known people longer will have better information than those who have only popped up in the last couple of years. But I would say Eddie is a pretty amenable guy. There's a lot worse to deal with. I can think of a lot of managers, and a lot of managers have come and gone on the South Coast as a whole over the course of the last 10 or 11 years. Again, some of them great to work with on and off the record. Some of them better off the record than on the record. But at the minute, Eddie, is great for us. Injuries, don't always believe what he says in the injuries. It's got to the stage now where it's a cat and mouse game with Eddie when it comes to injury news. But fundamentally, he knows and he respects the job I think that the media have to do. And ultimately, we're all supporting the club. There'll be times when you have to dig a bit deeper, and maybe the headlines aren't necessarily positive. But on a day-to-day basis, we all, and that's from us at Solent and from all the other media as well, we just want Bournemouth to do well. So, and he knows that, and hopefully he knows we support him.
Yeah, I think when it comes to getting the whole picture from the manager, I mean, with Eddie and other managers, the fans know that when they're being interviewed, they're not going to say everything that's going on behind the scenes. And so we appreciate you can't necessarily drill down and get every last piece of truth out of the manager, because it just doesn't work like that.
No, exactly. I mean, they don't want to show their hand. And I think it's another point worth making is that when you work at a local level, we've got to talk to these guys every single week. They're sort of what comes out of AFC Bournemouth is a crucial part of what we do in the week in terms of our news agenda and things. So you can't. I mean, if often you see the national newspaper guys or maybe satellite TV networks or something, they'll charge in on a big news story. They'll ask some sort of questions that maybe upset people, and then they'll disappear off into the sunset, never to be seen again. Now you can have a bit more license to do that when you haven't got these sort of more personal local relationships. And that's not to say that local media don't ask tough questions, because when they need to be asked, obviously they have to be asked. But a lot counts for the personal relationships that we have with not only Eddie, but also other people at the club, the likes of Jeff Mostyn and maybe one day Max Deming, who knows, maybe one day he'll decide to speak, although I think that's unlikely. The personal relationships you have at a local level definitely are different to those that the national media would have, I think.
Yeah, I heard the guy from Sky at the end of the Millwall game called Eddie Howe Steve when he asked him for an interview.
That sums it up really. And you can understand it to a sense. If you're going around to a different ground every week and speaking to different people, then mistakes will happen. But at the same time, I think getting a manager's name wrong is pretty basic.
In terms of keeping positive, I particularly remember during the end of the Paul Groves era, we were obviously doing pretty badly. The football was pretty poor and the writing was clearly on the wall. And I was listening to you and Willow on the radio. It must have been one of the away games, maybe the one at Swindon when we got hammered 4-0. And you were both doing your best not to slate him and not to say, well, he's going to be fired within a matter of days. Is it hard to do that when you know the writing's on the wall?
I think that's where it sort of reflects back to Willow's sort of overall positivity, and that in that situation, it's probably for me as the journalist part of the sort of partnership, if you like, to sort of throw things at Willow that to say, come on, Willow, Cherries fans can't put up with this level of performance, and then it's for Willow almost to bat it back and say. And that's one of the criticisms people will have of Willow is that he's always positive. Now, if that can ever be a criticism in life that someone's too positive, then it's a harsh one. But the same could be said of certain former Southampton managers. They were always positive, and that can sometimes pull a bit of wool over people's eyes. But Willow is, it is hard sometimes, and sometimes you feel guilty for trying to get Willow not to put the boot in, but sometimes to be honest. And there's a credibility factor with that as well, in that fans have watched a game quite often. If, for example, the fans that went to Swindon and saw the highlights will have seen that Bournemouth just weren't at the races at all and it wasn't good enough. But so if Willow comes on the radio and then says, well, actually it wasn't that bad, then suddenly there can be a credibility issue. So Willow has to be careful that while he is good at this, is that while he's remaining positive, he will make the points subtly in his own way. And, to Eddie Howe, he'll probably make the points off the air as well. He'll probably have a chat with him about things. But he's certainly a glass half full man. He certainly is the man that would look for positives in most situations, unless it was absolutely unavoidable that you couldn't find one.
I think in your position and in Willow's position, it's quite difficult to actually wield the knife and put it in to the manager, even if things aren't going well, for various reasons, one of which is the manager might stay.
Well, that is, again, that goes back to what I say about having to work with the people sort of every week. And the other thing is that obviously all of us that are commentators, we're ultimately fans of football as well, and we can see a game and see tactics and see things like the next fan can. But we're not coaches, so we're not football experts. None of us have done our coaching badges. That is principally why the likes of Willow and obviously Dave Merrington and Mark Kelly on our other coverage are there. It's almost for us to throw suggestions that maybe fans are having, saying, why isn't he doing this or why are they doing that? And it's for Willow's professional coaching eye to bounce back sometimes. So that's where we're sort of we're devil's advocate at certain times to say, well, hang on a minute, it would seem obvious that playing one up front away from home isn't the answer. Why isn't he doing that? And that's where hopefully Willow's professional sort of opinion comes in.
You mentioned Twitter earlier and how it helps you to get the team news. Another big thing that must have changed in the time you've been commentating on the Cherries is the feedback you get from the fans through things like text and Twitter.
It certainly has. I mean, the tweets have been a big thing for us in terms of interaction. I mean, our interaction has always been pretty good, actually, across all three clubs. But Twitter is so instantaneous, obviously, and whereas if you text into a radio station or your phone, then it's nearly a one-way conversation. Often by putting a comment to us on Twitter, other people see it, and it becomes a conversation between fans on Twitter. It obviously has its highs and lows. I mean, sometimes you get really good feedback. You get people making very valid and very fair points. Other times, I mean, it wouldn't be unfair to say you get people who are a bit of a pain, to be honest with you, who will just batter you the whole time. And sometimes we have to bite our tongue and not respond. I mean, once or twice, I know it's hard not to respond, particularly when you're operating under an umbrella account like Solent Sport. I mean, we've got something like 12,000 followers across all of our three clubs and obviously Hampshire Cricket as well. So in that 12,000, there will be one or two who don't like what you do and say they don't listen, when in fact there isn't really any other way to follow the Cherries apart from to listen to us on a match day afternoon, so whether they're telling the truth or not. But the hardest thing sometimes is biting your tongue and not wanting to get into a conversation with people, simply because on Twitter it's impossible. I mean, have a phone conversation, come in and see us, email us, and we can give you an extended answer as to whatever it is that the person's problem is. But it's hard not to get dragged into conversations. But it's always interesting at the same time because, if someone doesn't like what you do, it's interesting to hear why they don't like what you do, because, it can quite often trigger something that can make you improve it.
On a lighter note, you've had a bit of a Twitter moment yourself when it was mooted that Eddie Howe might come back. You said you'd come to one of the games dressed up as Elvis if he came back, and it turned out he did.
Yeah, I had to be as good as my word on that one, I'm afraid, with, again, Twitter being in the public platform that it is. And I can tell you it was extremely cold that night. I was dressed in a very thin Elvis suit. It was just one of those where I looked at the situation, and it was put that Eddie Howe or Harry Redknapp would be the next Bournemouth manager, and you can draw a line straight through Harry because he was I think he was at Tottenham at the time still, possibly, but Eddie, obviously you'd look at him in mid-table in the Championship, in a division higher, and you would look at it and say, well, from a footballing point of view, it wasn't ever going to happen. But obviously then it became evident that there were one or two personal reasons factored into Eddie's decision, and therefore once those things came out, then fair enough, it obviously was more of a life decision as well as a football decision. So I guess I made my sort of my Twitter prediction, if you like, purely on a footballing basis. So I still count myself a little bit unlucky. But as you say, you have to, if you put these things out there, you have to see them through. So there it was in my Elvis suit, and I think it made the Metro, and I had friends texting me who were on the tube in London the next morning reading the Metro newspaper saying there was some picture of me dressed as Elvis in there, which was obviously great news for me.
I just wanted to ask you about what us Cherries fans sometimes suffer from, a bit of a paranoia regarding the pecking order with the clubs that you cover. I think over the years we've probably seen ourselves as in third place in Solent's eyes in terms of Southampton, then Portsmouth, then us. And I think this probably came to a head when we were in the same division as Southampton. Even though they finished above us for quite a while, we were above them. I've heard one or two discussions on Solent about that. Do you get much jip about that?
That's probably the biggest thing we do get jip about from fans is not only the pecking order but also the frequencies that the clubs are on, and because the two are actually related in some ways. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Obviously, for many years, Southampton and Portsmouth were always in a higher division than Bournemouth. And therefore, that the pecking order, as you call it in inverted commas, was sort of established. Obviously, Portsmouth and Southampton flip-flopped in terms of being in the Premier League and slipping down, and Bournemouth have obviously come up to join them in the upper echelons and have gone past Portsmouth quite considerably now. And it is something that stirs debate. I mean, again, if you look, we wouldn't say that any of our clubs are bigger than any others in terms of how much interest we would give them or how we treat them. What you would say is, if you were looking at hard facts, you'd say Southampton have 30,000 people every week, Portsmouth have 18,000, or certainly did, and Bournemouth until this season had sort of 6,000 or 7,000. So if you were looking at hard numbers, then, and I think, Cherries fans listening to this, some will be shouting, no, we're a much bigger club than Portsmouth. Others will be realistic and say that Portsmouth, probably historically in terms of fan base, are a bigger club than Bournemouth because it's a big city. It's a very city-centric supporter base in Portsmouth. But in terms of our pecking order, I mean, we now have Bournemouth as the sort of second team in our editorial running order, if you like, on the basis of divisions. When it comes down to frequencies, that is down to our geographical transmitter locations, which, without getting too technical, our 96.1 FM transmitter is located on the Isle of Wight. Basically, if we put Bournemouth on FM on a Saturday afternoon when Southampton aren't playing, which is an argument we get from Bournemouth fans, is that, well, surely now Bournemouth is the main game when Southampton aren't playing. The argument against that, I'm afraid, is that if you put Bournemouth on 96.1 FM, there's nowhere for Portsmouth to go. We have to offer an FM and a DAB option for both clubs. Bournemouth obviously have 103.8 FM. They have DAB in Dorset, and there's an AM frequency as well. So if we put Bournemouth on 96.1 FM, there's no FM frequency for Portsmouth to go on. So that is basically the history behind the frequency sort of determination. The world obviously is moving all the time more towards DAB than FM, but we do have to consider that a lot of people still listen on FM radios these days. So when it comes to frequencies, it's purely geographical. When it comes to editorial order, in terms of what order we go to the games, you'll find this season that Bournemouth are the second team.
Yeah, I've noticed that. And it must be difficult when the teams are in the same division and, their positions can change quite regularly from who's above who and who's below who. And you can't, I suppose, be changing the order every single week.
Well, I think we actually got to a stage where we were changing it around, and that was simply because people that were and there wasn't millions of complaints. There was a few. A few texts would say, as you said earlier on, why are Bournemouth behind Southampton when we're above them in the league or whatever? I think we did change it almost as a nod to those people to say you have got a bit of an argument. At the moment, in the terms of the footballing pyramid, Bournemouth are above Southampton. So I think we actually did change it around a little bit, but it's one of those where you can't always bow to pressure from listeners or readers, because then suddenly anything they want to get changed, they'll all expect it to be done. But at the same time, it's for us as a station, we get probably the same number of complaints from fans of each club that their club don't get a mention. We have Southampton fans saying that we're biased against Southampton, which the fans of the other two clubs might laugh at. We obviously get fans of Pompey and Bournemouth saying the same, that their clubs don't get a look in. So we would often say, if we're getting complaints, and again, I'm saying complaints as if there's a sackload of complaints by the desk when we get in on a Monday morning. There aren't. It's one or two here and there. But we would say if we're getting all three clubs' fans having a bit of a moan now and then we're probably getting it about right, to be honest.
Moving on to this season so far, we've made a pretty good start. You must have seen most of the games, maybe all of the games. How do you see us faring as the season goes on?
Yeah, I missed, as luck would have it, I was away at the weekend when the 5-2 over Millwall, so I missed all that drama, unfortunately. But I have, as you say, seen most of the other games. I mean, it's draw a line through Watford and Huddersfield. I think they were obviously, as most people have done, part of the sort of early championship learning curve, and credit to Eddie for still chasing those games even when they were gone. But I think, some of the starts have been a bit of a worry. I mean, the first half has been a bit slow earlier on in the season. Obviously, the start against Millwall, 10 minutes gone, 2-0 down. Suddenly, after the way the last couple of results had gone, everyone was thinking, this is going to be a bad way to sign off for a couple of weeks. But, I mean, look at the table. We're in the international break. Bournemouth are 8th in the table. You speak to the players now, they feel like they absolutely belong in the Championship now. I know speaking to Simon Francis a couple of weeks ago, and he made a point of saying, I think a few people, we will have surprised a few people with how we've started, because maybe a couple of results early on, the win over Wigan, the win over Charlton early on, people think, flash in the pan, bit of momentum from last season is seeing them through. I think the momentum from last season does count for something, but it's fair to say, the character they've shown in adversity, and there has been some adversity. I read on your blogs earlier in the week, actually, that people are comparing sort of Bournemouth to Peterborough in the sort of gung-ho style of, we'll score one more goal than you. Well, there's an element of that in that obviously Eddie wants to play football and doesn't give games up. And even when, 2-0 up at Middlesbrough, tried to shut up shop there, and it's, well, not shut up shop, but sort of changed things, and that backfired a little bit. So there have been so many positives in sort of individual displays and in the way they've come back from adversity. But of course, it goes without saying there have been one or two failings as well. There's been some set piece goals. I mean, for Eddie Howe team to be conceding set piece goals is again a bit of a concern. But I think definitely sitting 8th in the table, if you'd without getting too cliched, if you'd offered any Bournemouth fan 8th in the table by the middle of October, definitely you would have taken it. And now, Harry Redknapp says this week, and he's been everywhere, launching his autobiography, but he says, Bournemouth definite top half Championship team. And people say now, if it gets to January and Bournemouth are within, striking distance of the playoffs, then Max Dermott is likely to put his hand in his pocket and say, well, come on then, Eddie, here's a couple of million, go and get us a couple of players that could be the difference between making the playoffs or not making the playoffs.
And what do you think of the new signings we've made so far?
Well, I tell you what, the man who's been a different player in the last two games has been Ian Hart. I mean, at the start of the season, everyone, when he was signed, thought fair enough. Obviously, coming towards the end of his career, was at Reading, so obviously he's been doing okay. Played reasonably regularly for them. Set pieces, excellent. But in his first couple of games in the Bournemouth shirt, it was looking like a dud, wasn't it? I mean, he looked a bit outpaced. He looked a bit sort of at sea. He didn't really look like he fitted in with the way that Eddie wanted things to work. And it appeared, for all intents and purposes, that Eddie Howe didn't fancy Ian Hart and probably realised he might have made a bit of a ricket. But credit to Ian Hart, he got thrown back in at Leeds. Maybe a shrewd move by Eddie. Maybe he thought, well, if one place Ian Hart is going to go and want to perform, it's going to be Leeds. So threw him in at left back. He was excellent there. By all accounts, he was excellent against Millwall as well in the game I missed. So if you'd have asked me 3 weeks ago, I'd have said Ian Hart probably a miss so far, but I think he could well turn into a hit. And of course, with Charlie Daniels likely to have this problem, it would seem nagging him on and off, I think, although he's been overseas to try and get it sorted, and by all accounts is back on the road to recovery. So Ian Hart at the moment, steady, but is improving. I almost count Ryan Fraser as a new signing this season because we didn't see him hardly last season. He's been excellent, although he's been hamstrung, obviously, and had to pull out of the Scotland under-21 squad. So that's a bit of a worry. He's only a young man and he's played a lot of football so far. So he's been a real bonus. He's probably been one of the standout players so far. Elliot Ward, and again, another one who I would say start the season, the defence looked a bit wobbly. Any defence that concedes 5 or 6, you'd have to say, oh, I'm not sure about them. But the last couple of games, him and Steve Cook have been a man-mountainous centre-half pairing. So he looks like he's really settled down now. And of course, our man Ranty up the top. When will he score? I mean, it's
starting to hang around his neck a bit now. I think it's 4 games, isn't it?
Yeah. As soon as a striker goes a little run without scoring, then it does. But particularly when you sign for, not only sign for a new club, but move to a new country, you do have a bit of a price tag attached to you as well. He obviously, he's made no secret of the fact he wants to sort of chase the Premier League dream. So he knows that people will be watching him and expecting him to do things. And again, there's been glimpses. We've seen plenty of quality from him in. The goal he made at I forget which game it was now, the home game. Was it Barnsley? Blackburn, sorry, yeah, Blackburn. When he put Ryan Fraser through, I mean, that was, in half a second, a moment of quality that can turn a game in the Championship. But he hasn't had a lot of luck in terms of the way the games have gone, because people keep getting sent off and he ends up playing out front on his own and things like that. So I still would like to see him have a run of, playing as one of 2 strikers. And I think we've seen, in the glimpses of quality that he's shown so far, that he's definitely going to be a decent player at this level. But like Ryan Fraser, you get one and then you're off and running. So hopefully it won't be too far away.
Yeah, we've all got our fingers crossed. And one of the 2 players have maybe struggled to find their feet in this division. I think they are now. But 1 or 2 have really flown. I'm thinking maybe of Grabban and Cook. They're doing really well.
Yeah, they would be the 2 up there who I would agree with you. Steve Cook again. Would readily admit that, and has readily admitted that he probably didn't expect to be in the team this season when they signed Elliot Ward. You look at last season and Tommy Elphick, club captain, a rock last season in the games that he played. With Elliot Ward coming in, you would have looked at the back 4 and say, well, it's going to be a Ward-Elphick central defensive pairing, and that Steve Cook might be the man, pretty unluckily, because he was very good last season as well, to be the one to be squeezed out. But to be fair to him, and I know Tommy Elphick wasn't quite fit at the start of the season, but it's a ruthless, the Championship is a ruthless division, and therefore if someone gets an opportunity, they're going to take it. And that's what Steve Cook has done, and not only taken it, but he now has probably made himself one of the first names on the team sheet. His long throws are a useful weapon as well, but he really is sort of developing into a mature performer, and you forget how young he is. I think he's only 22, 23. So
22, yeah. Yeah,
22. So, I mean, for a pretty composed centre-half who didn't play a lot at Brighton, and when he did play at Brighton, he was sort of right back, I think, before he came to Bournemouth. So he certainly is developing into a serious, steady performer at this level, because he's not physically the biggest. I mean, he's not particularly tall for a centre-half. He's not particularly broad for a centre-half. Not that I would necessarily want to take him on in a one-on-one, but so I've been really impressed with him this season. Grabban the same, often, unfortunately, has had to play out of position. He dropped back into midfield with quite good effect in one game where the team had a man sent off. But I always feel the rhythm has been a bit upset by the sendings off sort of the Bournemouth have had this season. Not there's been loads, but sometimes games have had to be changed because of red cards. So Grabban has obviously had that purple patch at the start of the season. He's had another couple since. So again, if he can, he's well on the way to hitting sort of 15, 20 for the season, then he's another one who's proving himself a Championship performer.
And just finally, Kris, how do you see our prospects of hanging on to Eddie Howe? Obviously, you mentioned earlier that he didn't just come back for football reasons, it was family reasons as well. We all want him to stay as long as possible. I'd find it difficult to accept anybody else as the Bournemouth manager now. I couldn't really accept it after he left the first time. Do you think we'll keep hold of him for a few more years?
Well, it's one of those, I think he's obviously got a Premier League dream, and he sort of has said that his personal reasons obviously were mainly behind his decision to come back, and therefore, I mean, Burnley is a lot. It sounds obvious. Burnley is a long way from the south coast. London, for example, isn't a long way from the south coast. So people will be looking around. People will be looking at Eddie Howe and thinking, right, he's in the Championship. Of course, he's been there before with Burnley. They finished reasonable positions in the season that he completed. They're obviously flying high at the moment, which I'm sure he'll be keen to reverse. But he's he's obviously an ambitious manager, but I think his perspective has changed a little bit. And speaking to him again in the last week or so, sort of surrounding his 1 year anniversary of being back, which is brought up this weekend, his perspective in life, I guess, has changed a little bit. And while he is ambitious and he would never want anyone to say he doesn't want to be the best he can be, because he does, at the same time, he sort of realises that there are also bigger things in life. And I think being happy in your life, both in football and away from football, counts for a lot as well. So I certainly don't think if jobs come up at Newcastle, Sunderland, anywhere up north, I don't think he's going to be racing up there to take them. Something like a London job, I mean, that's easily doable from Dorset. So there's so many positives in terms of Eddie as a bright young English manager. You just wonder whether people would look at his past and say, well, hang on a minute, he went to Burnley and then he sort of not bottled out of it, but he sort of threw the towel a little bit on that and came back. And the whole rigmarole of him actually going to Burnley in the first place was a bit of a will he, won't he? So I hope that doesn't count against him when people are considering him in the future. Saying all of that though, obviously with the investment of Max Demmin, there's the possibility, and Bournemouth fans are right to get carried away at the moment because you're 8th in the Championship, but there's a possibility that he could quite easily realise some sort of Premier League dream with Bournemouth. It probably won't be this season if we're being realistic, but in the next 2 seasons, if they build a squad that cost a bit of money and Max Demmin is patient, then who's to say he can't actually achieve everything he wants to achieve? And he hasn't definitively said everything that he wants to achieve is to get to the Premier League, but you would imagine it is. And to be a Premier League manager, then I mean, if you made me put a fiver on whether Eddie would still be the Bournemouth manager in 3 years' time, obviously, bearing in mind Elvis Gate, I wouldn't have a bet. But I think he's going to be around for a while to come yet. Whether
if we get in
other clubs want him or not.
If we get in the Premier League, I might have to borrow your Elvis suit.
That's not to say other clubs might not come in for him or might not be looking around him, but I think at the minute, with the way the club's going, and as long as Max Demmin and his Russian board members remain Eddie Howe men, and I think they are. He's obviously lost Eddie Mitchell, who was instrumental in bringing him back to the club, but as long as Max Demmin, I think they realise the club's going in the right direction. So I don't think there's going to be any panic stations if things suddenly took a turn for the worse and maybe results levelled out a bit, but. Yeah, I think we're going to be seeing Eddie Howe hanging around for quite some time.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. I can't think there is many other managers who are quite as popular with the fans across the whole of the Football League as he is. Anyway, Kris, can we look forward to hearing you against Nottingham Forest?
You can indeed, yeah. I'm actually, I've had a couple of weekends off doing other projects, but actually now I'm back in tandem, I think, for pretty much nearly the whole of the rest of the season now. So, I've had my 2 games off, and Forest and Leicester consecutive trips up the M1 coming up on Saturday mornings. So, the fixture computers really helped out Cherries fans there. But looking forward to it. There's some great games coming up. Bolton, I think, after that, and of course Eddie going back to Burnley will be an interesting one with them going so well, and a couple of former Cherries players banging in the goals as well. So, there's some great games on the horizon, and thoroughly looking forward to them.
Excellent. Well, keep up the good work, and thanks for coming on the show.
No problem at all.
Great work from Kris there, and I'm looking forward to hearing him back on air this weekend. I'd just like to thank everyone who has contributed to the View from the Stands fans page that I'm collating in the Matchday programme this season. You can see all of the views on the All Departments website at www.alldepartments.wordpress.com. And if you'd like to pen something yourself, get in touch by emailing alldepartmentspodcast@gmail.com or via Twitter @alldepartments. Well, Kris Temple's prowess behind the microphone isn't in doubt, but we're going to play out with a recording of much more questionable quality, released around the time of our triumph in the playoff final at the Millennium Stadium in 2003, when this butchering of a Pet Shop Boys classic wasn't enough to dampen celebrations on the South Coast. So up the cherries in all departments, and goodbye.
Go south, there's a team down there. Go south, with a lot of flair. Go south, they're gonna take us through. Where? To Division 2. Kick the Mossy, then Browning too. Big Fletch, O'Connor and Haters through. They're Bournemouth, they're the boys in red. Our Bournemouth, back off the net. Come on Bournemouth, you will hear us shout. Come on Bournemouth, when the the lads come out. Come on, Bournemouth, it's the greatest sound. Come on, Bournemouth, all around the ground is Wade Elliott, out on the wing, he's brilliant. The crowd all sing Carl Fletcher and all the team. You've really made our dream. Come on, Bournemouth, you will hear us shout. Come on, Bournemouth, when the lads come out. Come on, Bournemouth, it's the greatest sound. Come on, Bournemouth, all around the ground. Oh, Bournemouth, the best team in the south, from Reading down to Portsmouth. Bournemouth, we love you till we die. Oh, Bournemouth, till we reach the sky. There's Storm and there's Granty too. Oh, Bournemouth, yeah, we love you. Oh, Phillips, you really woke us up. And now you're gonna take us up. Bournemouth, we love you till we die. Bournemouth, till we reach the sky. Bournemouth, it's time to say goodbye. Goodbye to Division 3. Bye-bye to Division 3. Bye-bye to Division 3. Bye-bye to Division 3. Goodbye to Division 3. Go south, there's a team down there. Go south, with a lot of men. Go south, they're gonna take us through. Where? To Division 2. Goodbye to Division 3. Bye-bye to Division 3. Bye-bye to Division 3.